Hello and welcome back to Chess with Konstantin. Today is a special storytime episode about a largest upset in the history of US women's chess that almost happened. And the background for this particular game happens to be a Nashmadinov game from 1946. So the story is as follows. A little more than a decade ago, when I was still youngish, I was in grad school and also was playing in the Pan American Chess Championship. At that tournament, which is the largest college tournament in the Western Hemisphere, my old school, University of Texas at Dallas, also participated. And in one of the games, after I finished my game, we were kind of walking around and kind of joking around with my former teammates. And one of the members of the team kind of joked, "Look, Konstantin, your teammates are so weak. Look, they fell for such an obvious opening trick, da 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 da." And I kind of nodded at them and laughed and smiled. And I really wanted to get them back and show off in return. So I saw that one of my good friends, Stephanie Balam, very talented female chess player, was at the time rating probably 1800, and she was playing a very strong FIDE master from the University of Texas at Dallas team, who was rated about 2350. And I knew that her opponent was a fan of the Sicilian Dragon opening as black. And I was sure that she didn't know all the opening traps in the Sicilian Dragon. And so I grabbed Stephanie and I said, "Stephanie, let's go and take a look at this game by Rashid Nashmadinov from 1946. I'm sure that she won't know what to play against it." And believe it or not, move by move, the game followed the game from Nashmadinov. And her opponent was very surprised when she was getting crushed in the opening. So without further ado, let's show you what actually happened in the game. So my friend Stephanie was white and she played pawn to e4. And then her opponent played c5. Then we have the move knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, and knight takes d4. This is the normal opening of the Sicilian defense. Now in this position, black can play many moves. Black can play, for example, pawn to a6, which is the Najdorf Sicilian. We can play e6, which is the Scheveningen variation. Also, it is possible, and lately it's very popular on chess.com and Blitz, to play e5. I wouldn't recommend playing e5. It doesn't really make any sense, because it creates a backward pawn on d6 that later can become a target. But nevertheless, e5 is also possible. But the standard move here is knight to f6, attacking white's pawn on e4. And again, this is what happened in the game. So then Stephanie played knight to c3. And now we have the move g6 from black. I knew that her opponent would play this. This is the standard sequence for the main line of the Sicilian Dragon. The reason why it's called the Sicilian Dragon variation is because the pawn structure for black kind of looks like a dragon, one of those old-time Chinese dragons, or perhaps a European dragon with kind of a wing here. So that's the reason why. So the main line for this, like the normal way to play it as white, is to play a bishop to e3 and set up something called the Yugoslav attack. Basically, there is a saint, an Orthodox saint, that reportedly slew a dragon with a spear. And the spear here is going to be this bishop on e3. So the main line is bishop to e3, or Actually, before bishop e3, the main line is pawn to f3 to prevent knight to g4. So then bishop g7, bishop e3, and then white will push these pawns, put the queen on d2, castle queenside, and black will at the same time castle kingside, so we have opposite castles, and play something like bishop to d7, knight to c6, and then push these pawns, and both sides will be attacking simultaneously. And usually the winner is the one who basically checkmates the opponent faster. It's a very crazy opening system that involves a lot of many hours of theoretical preparation. It's beyond the scope of this video. But you know, you don't need to play either bishop e3 or f3 here, because I recommended that Stephanie doesn't play the main lines, and instead there's a very important opening trap that you should all know about how to play against the dragon, and that is to play pawn to f4 here, the 11 fish variation. And pawn to f4 is a very dangerous move for black, because now already on move 6, if black plays bishop to g7 here, black can resign the game immediately. This is regardless of what the computer is telling us, this position is completely lost now. The reason why the position is lost is now, I mean, and this happened in the game, now white plays pawn to e5, attacking this knight. And after pawn takes e5 and pawn takes e5, the knight has no good squares to go. For example, if the knight retreats to d7, then you have e6, with the idea that now if captured, then the knight will get to come to e6, attacking the queen and black's bishop, and black's position here, it will be completely busted positionally. So knight to d7 is really bad. Knight to h5 loses a piece, because after this you have bishop to b5 check, and after, for example, bishop to d7 blocking the check, then you have g4 attacking this knight, and again the knight has no squares and will be lost quite quickly. Another possibility is to retreat to g8, but if you're going to be retreating the knight back to g8, you may as well just resign the game. I mean, here bishop to f4, developing the piece, protecting the pawn, and look at this. All black's pieces except for this bishop are on the initial squares. White is almost all the way developed. I mean, this game is just not even close. At this point, black can just resign. So in the game, after e5 was played, of course the opponent was a very strong master, and she calculated all these variations and figured out that, okay, I may as well try to play for the win. She didn't go for this knight to g8 and didn't want to lose a piece. So she played knight to d5, which is again all according to plan. So now, after knight to d5, then white has the very important move bishop b5 check, and now again black has no good moves to play. So for example, if black plays knight to c6, then this loses considerably more than a piece, because you have knight takes c6, and after pawn takes c6, then bishop takes c6 with check and attacking the rook. And if you played, for example, king f8 here, then just rook gets captured, and if bishop to d7 defending the rook, then just queen takes d5, and black can resign here. It's completely lost. So knight to c6 is impossible, but neither is bishop to d7, because after bishop d7, then this knight is simply hanging and you capture, and after bishop takes, then you can just take it back and white is up a piece. So of course Stephanie's opponent calculated these possibilities as well, and after this check she played the only viable move, which was king to f8, and now white simply castles with this very strong attack on the f7 pawn, and also getting the king out of the way. Now at this point there are not really any good moves once again for black. So for example, if black tries to trade pieces, knight takes c3, then you simply have this beautiful move, knight to e6 with check. It's impossible to capture the knight because it's pinned. And if you take the knight with the bishop, then simply the checkmate will follow in the next move or two. Because of this discovered attack on the queen. So it's not really possible to take, and trying to develop, for example, to c6 is possible, but then you have a very strong move, queen to f3, with the double attack threatening checkmate on f7. And the only real move to defend is to try to play f5, but then you have e takes. And after knight captures here, then you just take this knight. And after b takes, then you don't even need to capture this pawn, but you just play a bishop to e3. You're not worried about this because then white just wins in exchange. And again, this game is not even close. You have an isolated pawn here. You're completely developed. All your attacks on the king are very strong. This is an open file, and this rook will shortly come into play. So according to the engine, white is just crushing this game, and you can just see by the activity that it really isn't even close. So there are no good options in this position. And after castle, my friend's opponent thought, okay, there are no really good moves, but it's possible to capture material, and I may as well try to play for the win and capture some material. And this is actually what Nashmadinov's opponent played in 1946 as well. So bishop takes e5 was played. And now the move that Stephanie responded with, and what Nashmadinov also played in his game, is bishop h6 check. Notice now that it's possible to move the bishop back, but that's okay. That's a pretty losing move because I mean, you're going to be moving the same piece twice. So instead, she just played king to g8, getting the king to potentially a safer square. I guess that was the thought process. And can you see now the combination for white, or the correct sequence of moves for white? I will let you pause the video for just a few seconds and give yourself a couple of minutes to really look at this position. Okay, we are back. If you found it, good job. And if you just want to enjoy the video, here white played knight takes d5, and after queen takes d5, there is a beautiful move here for white, and that beautiful move is knight to f5. The reason why this is a brilliant move is that knight to f5 discovers an attack on the queen. So capturing this knight is not possible. For example, if either bishop takes or pawn takes knight, then obviously the queen will be captured. And the threat here is if you don't take this knight and play some silly move, then in the next move, knight can capture on e7, and this will actually be checkmate. So black has to do something. And in this position, black played a queen to c5. And so far, the moves, my friend's game against this master, and the moves of the Nashmadinov 1946 game were identical. So after queen c5 check, the correct response for white here is to simply block with the bishop, attacking the queen. And now queen has to go somewhere. Obviously, if queen captures here, then you have a checkmate on the back rank. So queen has to come to c7. But after this, you're going to be mated anyway, because knight h6 check, and doesn't matter if king runs to f8 or g7. In the next move, you will have a checkmate after rook takes f7. However, there is a important rule in chess called the touch move rule, and that means that basically if you are playing over the board and you touch a piece, you have to move that piece. And unfortunately, maybe my friend got a little bit overexcited, but after queen to c7 check, she touched her king, and the king had to move. At that point, there's really only one square for the king, which was king to h1, and so king h1 was played. So now the opponent responded with queen to c7, defending against the threats of the back rank mate. And I want you to pause the video now. I would be very surprised if you find it, but actually there is a way still for white to win this game. So go ahead and give it a pause and give yourself a couple of seconds to see if you find the correct move. We are back. So in this position, the correct move for white is a very interesting tactic. Bishop to d7, sacrificing the bishop. The idea is that this is an interference tactic. So the idea is that if the knight captures on e7, this will be checkmate. And capturing with the queen loses the game to a mate in 3, because simply queen takes, and after it doesn't really matter what happens here. In the next move you will have a checkmate. If for example knight takes here, then this is mate, and if bishop takes, then also mate. And if bishop to g7, with the idea that now you can run away, then this is not a serious response, because this will be a checkmate in 2 moves with the queen. So here, after bishop to d7, the only move to defend is to play knight to c6, defending this square. So then white can sacrifice the knight with knight takes e7, and after knight takes a7, which is forced, the only move here for white is, and of course it's not really possible to find over the board, but the only move here is rook takes f7, sacrificing the rook. And after king takes f7, according to the computer, there's a forced mate in 23. So unfortunately, my good friend didn't see the forced mate in 23 and ended up losing this game. But this is really quite a spectacular example of why it's important, even if you're winning completely and about to score the biggest upset in chess history, you should still be very, very careful about touching pieces, and make sure before you touch a piece that really that's the piece you want to move. So I hope you enjoyed this absolutely insane game, and for more content about how to crush the Sicilian defense, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much. Konstantin out.